Well, it's John Black, Super Chemist. We're on a new video. It's going to take a few videos to do this one, man. How to calculate reparations. Okay, first of all, we got to figure out who's going to pay the reparations, who deserves to pay it. Well, we're going to figure out, we're going to take everything into consideration here before we calculate this, right? 1789 is when we started the Constitutional Republic of the United States of America. That was the year that George Washington was voted into office and became president, 1789. I googled 1800. I have OCD. That's a nice even number. It isn't much. It isn't really in the middle there of the the U.S. slave thing. That's 11 years after we created the Constitutional Republic, but it's 61 years before the Civil War. Okay. So it's not in the middle, but I like 1800 because, it's an even number. So I Googled it. It says 25% of the South had slaves. So in 1804, they abolished slavery in the North. Okay, the Northern Republicans, they controlled the north half of the nation, so they got rid of slavery in 1804. But before that, in 1800, there was barely any slaves in the north. So if there's 25% and half of the country, the South, that half, if 25% of them had slaves, that means overall through the whole country, if you double the population, right? Because the South is only half. If you double it to include the North, you have to take that percentage in half, right? Because 12.5% would move up into the North, so that you'd have an overall percentage, right? So that means 12.5% of the country owned slaves at that time, right? And they were mostly white, right? Now I want you to think, okay, just use your common sense. You don't have to look nothing up or do no math with this. If all whites, right, the slave owners, procreate at the same rate as everybody else, like if everyone in the country just procreates, by procreate I mean have kids, then the percentage of the whites or the slave owners in the future will be the same, right? If you have a population of people and 12.5% of them are slave owners, right? When the population grows, that percentage will stay the same. You know what I mean? If as long as everybody procreates about the same rate, right? So whether it's a day later, it's 20 days later, a year, a century, 10 centuries, if everyone procreates the same amount, the descendants of the people that own slaves are going to be 12.5%. No matter what you do, no matter how long into the future you go, it's going to be the same. That's the way math works, man. That's how proportions work. So that means today, right, if that was the only thing you took into consideration, like, you're not going to take immigration or anything else into consideration. Yeah. Today that means 12.5% of the white people, not of the country, of the white people, okay, have ancestors who own slaves, right? That means 87.5% of whites didn't. 90% almost of white people didn't even have nothing to do with slavery, right? And their ancestors. But, right, I want you to think also too. Then we had like 80% of the population was white, right? Today we only have 60% of the population that would be white. So this 12.5%, right, it would go down because this is 12.5% of the white people, right? But now 20% of the white people are not white. Of the population, 20% of them are Hispanic now, right? So that would make it even lower if you're talking about the 12.5% is 12.5% of white people, not the whole country, right? And if our percentage went down to 60% from 80% of the whole population, that means that the descendants of those people went down too when you're talking about the whole population, right? So it ain't even 12%, 12.5% today because of that. You know, you're going to have to take it down a fifth of the way, right? So that 12.5% is going to go down to like 10% or something like that, you know what I mean? But let's not even take that into account, right? You also have the fact that rich people do not procreate as fast as poor and middle class. They have kids less than the poorer you are. It seems like the more kids you have because the dumber you are, I guess. So remember, the percentages would stay the same as you go through time, no matter how big your population grows, right? If everyone procreates at the same rate, but they don't procreate at the same rate. Rich people procreate less. So therefore, that 12.5% is definitely, let's take it down to 10% because those two factors alone, there's more than 100 million factors we can take it. Those two are really major. The fact that rich people do not procreate as fast as poor people in middle class, and the fact that that 12.5% was only talking about white people, wasn't talking about the whole, wasn't talking about black people, wasn't talking about Hispanic people, wasn't talking about Asian people. Because they were, you know, there weren't really many Hispanics or Asians to really talk about, you know what I mean? But, so we take it down to 10%, right? Okay. Let's see what else we got here. And keep in mind, when you can say, well, half of the South was fighting for slavery. No, not really. Keep in mind, 75% of the whites in the South had no slaves. They were poor. I mean, there was no middle class really back then. It was you either lived on a farm and you were poor, or you had money and you opened businesses up and had a cotton field and you know, big giant farms. They would never send, these poor people would never send their sons into war, especially back then. It wasn't like they could send out the military to make you go to war. You know, these were farm, you know, they could have just hid their son. I mean, as soon as they see some military come in, they'd just say, hey son, go in our hiding place that we have. And they could just dug a hole somewhere, covered it up with something, then they'd just jump in the hole and wait for them to, you know, no, you couldn't force them back then. There wasn't a machine big enough to force anyone to go to war. They would not. They were tricked into thinking it was all about the states' rights over the federal government's rights. Kind of like what they're doing today. They're trying. We're fighting over states' rights and federal rights. And then I went on to say we are at 12. Why should reparations for rich people? Okay, this talked about procreation. Then I want to bring up this. Okay, so we're already down to 10%, right? And I'm being generous. It's actually lower than that. If you talk about the fact that rich people do not procreate as fast as poor and middle class, and they have been diluted because Hispanics and Asians have come into the picture more, and that has diluted the white population, meaning the percentage of the total population is going to take that 12.5% down even lower. We took it down to 10, even though we should take it more. Okay, right? Now, I think we should take it to 8%. Let's do both of them. I say 8% to 10% it should be at right now, you know, in our discussion here. Then now we have to take in, you're not thinking about immigration, right? You got immigration. Now I want you to think about this, man. 1776, the population of the country was 2.5 million. Today it's 330 million. Okay? We didn't go from 2.5 million up to 330 million by just having sex and having kids. That didn't happen. That's stupid. That did not happen. Okay? And at the beginning of even our right, let me see here. So half of the population of the U.S. population today are people that their ancestors came into the country after we abolished slavery. Okay, I want you to think about it. From 1776 to 1865, that's like 100 years, say. And then 1865 to 1965 would be 160 years. Okay, so for 100 years, I forget what I was saying. But anyways, half of the population is not even, after slavery, put it this way, after slavery in 1865, there was only 30 million people here, man. Only 30 million. And we're at 333 million right now. Biden just let in 20 million people. You know what I'm saying? Don't tell me that, we let in like, when we're slow letting people in, we let in like 500,000 people every year. And that's legally. Tag on another 500,000, that's half a million for illegals. That's 1 million a year that has come to our country, like every year, 1 million people. And after slavery, there's only 30 million people here. Yeah, a lot of them came in because they're immigrants. Because we open up the border like idiots. We just let anyone in just because we need people. The rich people need workers. Yeah. Well, I say screw the rich people. I don't need workers. I need work. So, yeah, 30 million people. You think about it. That was in 1865. But when you figure this out, you got now you're gonna take a 10%, right? Because most people have just come in after slavery was abolished. You can't blame them for anything, right? Like Trump. Trump's people, he came in after slavery. So, most people came after. And you know why, too? Because before slavery, it was harder to get into this country, man. Like just going across the Atlantic Ocean would take you 6 months, maybe. It was almost impossible to come to our country, man. But in the last 160 years since they abolished slavery, you got planes, you got cars, you got trains, you got, it's just a lot easier, man. A lot more people came in now, in the last 160 years than the first 100 or the first 80 or whatever it was. You know what I mean? Because also there was twice as much time. It was 100 after slavery. It's 160 years. Before slavery, it was really only like 90 years or something like that, right? So it's almost double after. So yeah, yeah. So 50%. So now you take that 10% down to 5% because of immigration. And my belief is that 10% should be at 8. If you take that in half, it'd be 4%. So we're between 4 and 5%. And as a matter of fact, since we didn't take into consideration the Hispanics, let's take that and we'll take it down to 4%. We'll say only 4% of people are even descended from people who that were slave owners. That means like 96% of the country did not have any ancestors who had slaves. 96%. Might as well say no one had slaves, for God's sakes, at that point. I'm running out of time. Oh. So 96% of